Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Telford Wrekin Council Planning Committee. This evening's meeting is held in public to ensure that all those involved or interested in the planning applications can see and hear how the decisions are made. It's important that the speakers are able to present their information without interruption and that the council members of the committee are able to hear and consider the material presented. Only those people who have been notified are able to speak. I'd ask everyone else to remain quiet and not to interrupt the meeting and to allow the meeting members to make their decisions. I will remind everyone that council meetings can be photographed or recorded, and I ask all participants to recognise the importance of the planning process. And please, will people silence or turn off their mobile phones? Thank you. Welcome to the meeting. Apologies for absence.
Councillor Ian Fletcher, who will be substituted by Councillor Jane Greenaway, Councillor Amrit Jouar, substituted by Calder Sahota, Councillor James Jones, substituted by Bob Wellington.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Two there, Jane and Nigel.
The Reynolds House, former Boyd House. I'm a member of Lawley and Overdale Parish Council, but however I haven't discussed anything to do with this application.
Okay. Mine's TWC 2022-0170 Granville Landfill. I'm a member of Donington and Muxton Parish Council, but I don't take part in any of their planning committees or anything. I have nothing to do with planning on the Parish Council, and I'm also a member of Granville Management Committee.
Thank you, Nigel. Any other declaration of interest? None? All right. Before we go any further, can I introduce Stuart Evans, who's our external political advisor on planning matters. He's standing in tonight to put it on the right track of many things, I hope.
Thank you, Chair.
So, item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Are they a true and correct record?
Moved, Chair.
Moved. All in favour? And against? No, they weren't there, so okay. Item 4, deferred / withdrawn applications. Valerie?
There are none, Chair.
There are none, thank you. Item 5 is site visits.
There are none proposed, Chair.
None proposed. Item 6, plan application for determination. I intend to do these in the order which they appear on the order paper tonight. And 6.1 is the Granville Landfill, Grange Lane. That's TWC 2022/0170 is the first one. Now, I have a list of speakers on this one, and I also have a statement to read out from Veronica Fletcher, who called it in as a ward councillor, one of the ward councillors. Are you reading this, Kieran? So Kieran will read that statement out, please.
Continue to object to the planning application for a number of reasons. Firstly, looking at points that are permitted by the planning process. Point 1, highway issues. There are also issues with the added traffic across the surrounding road network. In the near future, the properties being developed adjacent to Grange Lane will start to be inhabited, bringing hundreds more vehicles to the roads. The original extension to the site, which agreed the closure in 2025, took into account the house building in the area. If this application is approved, you'll blight the lives of the residents for a further 5 years. Point 2, noise and disturbance, smells and fumes. All of the above issues are created by the landfill site being in operation and should be removed as soon as practically possible. Better management is required on site today, let alone allowing an extension to the existing licence period. The noise from the HGVs using Grange Lane is a nuisance, often early in the morning as they start to back up to get into the site as soon as it opens. The noise from the site itself, with vehicles, machinery in operation all day. Several objection comments on this application have included a reference to the constant loud banging, perhaps caused by air-gas guns. As we've all had to adapt to a new way of life post-pandemic, more people are spending time at home during typical working hours, and the constant banging is completely unacceptable. Vile smells are common and increase in vermin. likely exacerbated by the poor practice followed on site, where waste is regularly left uncovered at the end of the working day. There was also a major fire on site in September 2020. If the wind was blowing in a different direction on the day, this could easily have reached the same level of publicity as the fire at the Greenways site in Ketley, with more residents impacted. Quite simply, I don't feel safe having the landfill site operating poor practices so close to residential properties. The height of the waste mound will be overbearing in the vicinity, with all the problems this will bring to the thousands of residents nearby, and will blight their lives for an additional 5 years. Point 3, national policy. I'm aware of the national policy on waste, but would point out that landfill is at the bottom of the hierarchy of waste disposal. The site is now used to bring waste from outside the area, not utilised for our use. Other people, rubbish is being dumped in Telford. In Telford, we recycle, reuse, or finally convert waste to fuel. We do not landfill except for a few limited items. Point 4, amenity disturbance. Traffic generated by the landfill site has been assessed in the previous application and is a huge problem to businesses and public, as complaints to Telford Wrekin Council will verify. If granted, it will continue for a further 5 years, which is unacceptable. Thus, I ask members to refuse this application.
Thank you, Kieran. The reason I didn't ask the plan officer to come in first was because it's we discussed this at length at the last meeting, and he's got all the stuff, so I was just taking notes of what's being said.
Did you want me to make an introduction?
No, it's okay. We're in it now. Councillor Lisa Dugmore, please, from Muxton Parish Council. Hello, Lisa. You've got.
Thank you, Chair. Donington and Muxton Parish Council wish to oppose this planning application for a lot of the reasons that Veronica Fletcher has also already stated. We find it incredible that Telford is highlighted as a pioneering recycling borough, with the rest of our waste going to make fuel, to make energy, and now we're importing. We're proposing importing other authorities' waste. It doesn't make any sense. Purely, not only from a waste point of view, but also from an environmental point of view. The HGV lorries bringing the waste into our borough. The planning report acknowledges that waste sent to landfill fell by 9 million tonnes from 2010 to 2019. So I see no reason why this won't continue to fall. So the reasons for needing this landfill site decrease all the time. Veronica also highlighted the building, the housing infrastructure that's gone in by the Granville. So to continue this for another 5 years when you've got a primary school planned for that site, it's not acceptable for the youngest members of our society to go to school next to a landfill site. This landfill site already had an extension in 2007 from 2 metres to 3 metres. So the arguments that potters need this additional time in order to fill the landfill site, for want of a better phrase, it is a bit of a moot point. And the fact that if they're not given this time to return the site to the plan, then the original plan is already another moot point. The site's already increased on the agreed plan. Thank you. No, I know you've discussed this at length, and as the residents that actually are going to be the nearest, or some of the nearest, to this landfill site, which incidentally you can see from 3 miles away, as it's not actually a landfill site, is it? It's a land rise site. Then we're the most impacted in Donington and Muxton, I believe, and we strongly oppose this. Thank you.
Councillor Adrian Lawrence, Ward Councillor.
Thank you, Chair.
3 minutes, Adrian.
Thank you. Okay, members, it's deja vu from our previous meeting. Residents are strongly against this application. If you consider that this is perhaps the 5th or 6th extension that has been in the life of this site, it doesn't belong in a residential area like Muxton. If this was a new application, I ask you to think of your own ward. How would you react if a big land rise was created in a new site in an existing ward? It just isn't appropriate. Because this is an existing site, that doesn't really change things. We shouldn't allow this site to continue. Residents around this location purchased properties on the belief that the site was closing. They had assurances and emails and written and verbal assurances from the council that the application, there would be no continuation of the site, but that, if this continues, would have proved to be wrong. So people have made life choices based on assurances, which, you know, we're now changing the basis of those. As a borough, we declared a climate change emergency not that long ago, and that for me is a really important decision that we made. But we're, you know, the foundation of industry, the birthplace of industry. If any place in the country should be leading the light in, you know, the future, it should be Telford and Wrekin, and that future should be one of recycling, not where we're using the lowest possible choice, which is a land rise or a landfill. This is waste which, for this company, it's cheaper to bring waste from Welsh and dump it in Telford than it is to recycle it. So that is just wrong. We shouldn't be allowing that to happen. We should be saying that we don't need land rises and landfill. Telford should be an area where there's no land rise, there's no incineration, and we focus our efforts on getting recycling to the highest standard we can, and we should lead as an exemplar authority and not be just allowing companies like this to shortcut the system and make a quick buck at the environmental expense. There's a history in the UK of environmental mistakes being made. You only have to look at the Ukraine-Russian situation. We're buying gas from Russia. That was a disaster, and this is an environmental disaster by not taking the opportunity of recycling. So residents would really like to say that, you know, we believe this is just the thin end of a wedge. 5 years from now there'll be another application, and it'll just go on and on and on, and endless explanations and excuses will be found to continue what just shouldn't be happening. We should set the line in the sand and just say no to this application, and we should be proud of that and you know, lead by example around the country. It's just the wrong thing. So residents are really asking you, please make the right decision for the borough and for Muxton. Thank you.
Helen Howard, please. Hello again, Helen.
I'm ready.
When you're ready to start, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to speak to you about this proposal for the extension, and I'd like to quote from the Telford and Wrekin Council's Waste Policies and Proposal document 2006. In the foreword it says, and I quote, "This borough currently manages over 90,000 tonnes of waste each year, and even with the maximum participation in recycling, there will remain a residual amount of waste that needs disposal. Traditionally, this has meant landfill, but this cannot continue to be the case." I end the quote. Mr. Chairman, of course, you will remember this virtuous document as you feature inside the front cover, and you signed it off. We applaud you for it, because this document and what followed has allowed Telford and Wrekin to act in a proactive, virtuous manner in their waste management policy. Remember in 2013 when the council awarded their £27 million contract to Veolia? The specification for that contract was for recycling at Horton Wood and other local centres and incineration at the Battlefield site at Shrewsbury. You, the council, instigated this virtuous policy, which is why CETA closed the Granville site when their contract came to an end in 2016. There was no longer the local need for a landfill from Telford. Potters saw a commercial business opportunity, and that's what this is, a business opportunity to maximise profits versus what we are arguing for, which is the merits of recycling as opposed to the dumping of rubbish in a landfill. Telford and Wrekin do not stand alone. Powys County Council are the same. The Welsh Waste Management Policy, and I quote from page 10, 2025, towards zero waste. Seen as an intermediate step where waste will have been significantly reduced through actions on sustainable consumption and production, and any waste produced will be managed in a way that makes of the most valuable resources. This will mean that recycling is maximised and residual waste is minimised, with landfill eliminated as soon as possible. Potters are based in Welshpool in Wales. They should therefore be following the Welsh management waste policies. Instead, they are actively pressurising your planning officers and all of us here this evening into allowing them to continue to dump more rubbish into the landfill site with no evidence provided for recycling. For last year, WPS produced figures stating 164,000 tonnes of rubbish was dealt with at the Granville. Now, if you take into account Potter's municipal household waste contract from Powys County Council and the fact there is about 20,000 tonnes of residual waste deposited at the Granville, this means there is no evidence of recycling for 144,000 tonnes of waste last year. So please refuse this 5-year extension. Please do not regress backwards and undo all the good proactive work you have done with Telford and Wrekin's waste management policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you. Very fast to come back upon me. Georgina Daintith, please.
Hi again. Thank you, Chair. In response to the questions raised at the previous committee, the Council have commissioned an independent survey to review whether there is still a need for a landfill site in Telford. Your officer has summarised the key points in his report. However, my client would like to emphasise the following. Evidence presented proves that there is a need to process waste that cannot be recycled and reused, and although at the bottom of the waste hierarchy there is a clear need for landfill sites still. The independent report demonstrates how the waste management process cannot be seen in isolation in terms of administrative areas. The report highlights that the borough does have an excellent recycling record. However, this is only achievable through reliance on facilities outside the borough that take in Telford's waste. Granville needs to remain open to offer a landfill facility to those other authorities that need it. This collaborative working is strongly emphasised in national policy. It is of strategic importance that this landfill site is allowed to operate until it reaches the agreed capacity, therefore maximising an existing licensed landfill facility and ensuring restoration control levels are met to create a link to Granville Country Park. Other environmental benefits for the borough are the receipt of monies generated from landfill tax. An additional £650,000 would be collected from landfill tax over 5 additional years. My client has the discretion to allocate these monies to any nationally qualifying project. However, will continue to work with Shropshire Wildlife Trust to ensure the funds are spent locally to the site, and there's a list of projects that are in the officer's report showing where the money goes. These statutory consultees have reviewed the application in terms of highways impact, noise, air quality and amenity and raised no objections. Many of the public concerns raised are addressed and controlled by the strict Environment Agency permit under which the site is operated. Government guidance on waste planning makes it clear that it is important to avoid unnecessary duplication of controls. Continuation of the landfill in operation, taking in waste that cannot be processed via other methods via the waste hierarchy, represents a sustainable use of this valuable resource. The proposal fully accords with the aims of local and national waste policies and guidance. On balance, your professional officer has again recommended this application for approval. I therefore respectfully request that you support this application, which has undergone significant scrutiny from independent experts. Thank you.
Ian, it's over to you to answer all the points.
Thank you, Chair. Do my best. I've got most of them written out, fortunately. At the previous committee, members raised both questions and concerns which have now been answered within the officer report. The need to extend the period in which the landfill can operate rests on the ability of the current operator to fill and complete the landfill as originally granted, in order to make the most efficient use of the site and carry out the remediation proposals as already approved. It should be noted that the operation of this site and the remediation works to be carried out is strictly controlled by the Environment Agency and also requires their approval. Whilst concerns raised by speakers in respect of operations at the site are noted, these are not matters relating to the variation request and are a matter for the permitting authority. One of the reasons for the request is the closure of the landfill site for approximately 2 years in 2017. Members question why this happened, and I can advise that this was not down to the current operator. The site was previously owned by Shropshire Waste Management and operated by CETA. Following the opening of a waste to energy plant in Shrewsbury, the majority of Telford's domestic waste was transferred outside the borough to this facility. The operator no longer found it viable to operate from Granville, at which point it was put up for sale and purchased by Potters Group, the current owner. From the site's closure in 2017, Potters undertook due diligence prior to submitting an offer to purchase. A long legal process then took place, as well as the requirement for Potters to obtain the necessary licence from the Environment Agency. This helps provide an understanding to why the process took nearly 2 years before the site could reopen, and demonstrates why no waste was deposited at the landfill during that period. Since then, Potters have carried out the operation in accordance with the original approval, but have not been able to utilise the maximum yearly tonnage permitted of 220,000 tonnes. And I refer members to the table under paragraph 6.1 in the office report, which shows the total waste received and the additional capacity still available. This reduced input of over 450,000 tonnes over the last 5 years, plus any shortfall from now onwards, along with the closure of the site, helps clarify why the site has not been able to be completed in the time permitted and the need for the additional 5 years. I would advise members that in the 2007 committee report it was recognised that waste minimisation, reuse and recycling would have an impact upon the amount of waste landfilled, and even then the year 2025 was not seen as an exact prediction. Where we are now is largely as a result of reuse and recycling rates being further ahead of what was foreseen, and there are examples of this across the country. The Bletchley case referred to in the original office report is just one key recent example. The LPA considered that due to the limited timescale we're now dealing with, the requested 5-year period is more likely to be an accurate reflection on the amount of time needed to complete operations. Of course, should capacity be reached earlier, there is a chance the restoration project could commence sooner. Members also question why Telford should take waste from elsewhere if there was no need for it in Telford. It should be noted that the independent report was very complimentary of Telford Wrekin's recycling record, suggesting that it's one of the best performing local authorities in the UK. However, in order to achieve this, Telford sends its waste outside the borough to be processed, for example to Shropshire and Wolverhampton. This forms part of a waste relationship with all authorities, and national guidance is very clear and states that lost my place. And very clearly states that authorities should work jointly and cooperate when considering waste management. With very little opportunity to find appropriate new landfill sites, the remaining capacity in Granville should be used effectively and efficiently, as unfortunately zero waste landfill is not yet an achievable goal. I would refer in particular to the 2015 Telford Wrekin Council Waste Evidence Base report. This was clear in its recommendations that existing facilities, including Granville, should be safeguarded during the planned period. Most recent government data also indicates that landfill remains the second most common destination for waste after recycling, indicating its continued importance as a waste resource and as part of the waste hierarchy. Moving on to the site restoration, the independent WPS report confirms that the landfill restoration is taking place in accordance with the original consent and follows Environment Agency requirements. The EA must authorise the restoration plans. Part of the site has already been restored, and according to guidance, all efforts should be made to restore the site to its natural surroundings. Officers consider that it's extremely important that the final restoration scheme, as approved under the original scheme, is allowed to be completed in order to ensure the site blends into the surrounding landscape, simply from a visual impact. Furthermore, and perhaps of concern, is that the recommendations of the independent report indicate that should a revised scheme be required, there may be geotechnical and hydrological problems due to the need to provide a suitable engineered cap which is tied into the landfill liner around the edge of the site. The cap ensures the prevention of contaminants escaping the site and avoids issues such as water getting into the site, gas escaping, slippage of material, and the ability for it to support a growing medium as part of the final restoration. Closing the site early would require the need for a revised scheme that may not be feasible and has potential to cause environmental issues that are currently not taken account of. In relation to this, the officer report clarifies that whilst the site is termed as landfill, there is often some land raise due to the requirement to cap the landfill. This creates an element of land raise, but as reported, this is all modelled in the approved restoration scheme. In regards to greenhouse gases, which was mentioned also at the last committee, the independent report clarifies the impact of landfills upon greenhouse gases, which is a result of organic waste being broken down. It recognises that the amount is largely dependent upon the volumes of organic waste which is received. Granville Landfill does accept some organic waste. However, WPS, the independent report, have analysed the data from waste returns and confirmed that over the previous 5-year period there was not a high proportion of organic waste received. On that basis, it is considered that this results in a lower concentration of methane and other VOCs produced from the landfill waste and will not have a considerable impact upon the borough greenhouse gases emissions target. There is considerable methane monitoring on site, and methane is extracted and used in 2 1 megawatt engines which is sent back to the grid. This has also been mentioned by the agent for the scheme, but just moving on to some of the benefits of landfill. In the office report under section 8 was commentary on the landfill tax. Landfill tax applies to all waste disposed of by the way of landfill at licensed landfill sites unless the waste is specifically exempt. The Landfill Communities Fund is a tax credit scheme enabling operators of landfill sites to contribute money to organisations enrolled with Entrust as environmental bodies. I note that departments within the authority have confirmed they have tapped into this funding, and some examples are shown in the report, including Granville Country Park improvements, as well as other schemes including pond restoration within the borough and the creation of pitches at Newport Rugby Club. The tax generates approximately £130k per year and will continue to do so whilst the landfill is in operation. In respect of the impact on nearby residents, the report provides further details of the timescales of approvals of residential development in the local area. This demonstrates that based on the dates of approvals, development could have come forward much sooner, and in some cases within 8 or 9 years of the current end of the landfill in 2025. If the variation is granted, as these schemes have been implemented much later than expected, the length of time would be similar. As such, impacts upon the highway network would not be significantly different than would have been modelled and considered when approving those schemes. I would also add that with a further 3 years left on the existing landfill consent, a significant amount of houses will be occupied on the nearest sites within that time period, and as such, the impact upon residents will be no different. It should also be recognised that landfill operates below its permitted limit of 200,000 tonnes, and the approval of this variation will also permit a reduced daily limit from 1,500 tonnes to 1,350 tonnes. So that's part of what's been asked as part of this proposal. As indicated in the original report and this update, members are aware the management of the site itself is controlled by the Environment Agency permit, and the control of environmental processes are governed by them. This includes matters such as bird control. National planning guidance is clear that local planning authorities should presume that these separate pollution control regimes should operate effectively. Officers conclude that there are reasonable grounds for the request to extend the period in which the landfill can operate and be completed. There remains both a local and national need for the landfill, despite rapid improvements in the rate of recycling, and national guidance indicates that existing waste facilities should be used efficiently. As such, it is clear that allowing the site to be completed as approved ensures a satisfactory and safe restoration scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. So, for debate, Nigel, then Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I wasn't at the last meeting, so forgive me if I bring anything up that might be slightly, that might have been said at the May meeting. I mean, I just feel that this is a bit of an opportunistic application, in as much as getting it in quickly before the new developments that are there, that are being built now, are actually occupied. I mean, historically, if there hadn't have been any extensions to the Granville, it would be closed by now, and it wouldn't, and we wouldn't actually be sat here. I mean, it was established in 1998, which is 24 years ago. It was extended in 95 and extended again in 2008. And the capacity of the landfill in 2008 was actually increased by 32%, nearly a third. So from 1.9 million metric cubic metres to 2.5 million cubic metres. And the figures that are in the reports say in 2020, which was 2 years ago, it was 81% or 81.5% at capacity. So there isn't an awful lot left. There isn't an awful lot of capacity left. And also it's worth bearing in mind that the restoration plan is similarly 24 years old. Now, if you go on to page 15, 6.1, the additional waste capacity 3 years ago was 62%. Going in percentages, not in tonnes, because it's easier to understand if you go on percentages. And 2 years ago, the additional waste capacity had dropped from 62% to 47%. And last year, in 2021, it had dropped to 18%. Now, we haven't got figures for this year yet, but as you can see, at that rate, there won't be any spare capacity in 2-3 years' time. So the thing is that, I do question whether or not there is spare capacity. And the other thing to bear in mind is that some of the figures are given in tonnes, and as I've quoted on the other things are given in volume. So therefore, tonnage you can't really compare. You're not comparing like with like on that. Now on 8.3.2, it refers to the impact of residents refers to the impact on residents of the new developments approved with 8 to 9 years of the local landfill site remaining. Now, surely this is an argument that's going against this extension, as we're now 3 years till the landfill should be closed. And with the homes beginning to be occupied, if at the time of approval the landfill had 13 to 14 years left, then these developments wouldn't have been approved, because quite honestly it would be difficult to sell houses so close to the landfill, particularly if it's got 14-15 years to go. So, and we should also be mindful of the problems that we see not so far away at Wally's Quarry, in Newcastle under Lyme. Telford Wrekin surely doesn't want to have all the adverse publicity and the associated costs that this is going to that this would incur. So the thing is that as we've had all these, really, this isn't the time to be doing another extension. And as I said right at the very beginning, it does seem a bit opportunistic trying to slip this in quickly before the houses start to become occupied. Now, mention has been of the landfill tax benefits, and now then the landfill tax benefits goes to the Landfill Communities Trust, and so you know it sounds quite high figures, doesn't it? £192,500, but only a quarter of that has actually gone to the area that might actually be impacted by the landfill. The majority of areas that do receive money will not be impacted by this at all. And of course, the £650,000 that's been mentioned that the extension would generate for the Landfill Communities Fund can be accessed by any local authority. It's not just local; it's a national thing. So the thing is that you know and has been mentioned previously by a member of the public, there are problems that neighbours are experiencing close to the landfill, and we've heard about the fire that occurred a few years ago. Now, and if we turn to the independent planning statement provided by WPS, I mean, the report has some interesting statistics, but there seems to be very little balanced discussion. I would have expected for an independent report to be giving both sides of the argument for and against the extension, but it seems to be just all about trying to explain why the extension should go ahead. So it doesn't seem very independent to me. It's certainly not balanced. On page 13 of the report, for some reason the Battlefield Recycling Centre isn't mentioned, and on figure 3, where there's a map of neighbouring landfill sites, there are no Welsh ones at all, and some of those are closer than the ones that are indicated, one of which is being Wally's Quarry. Now, there's a mention of the visual impact, and it's difficult to see where these raised lines of sight were, because it says it's the red dot on the map, but of course on a black and white photocopy it's a bit difficult to spot. But I can confirm as a resident, and I see it every day, if you're driving up Donington Wood Way from the Clock Tower roundabout, you can see the Red Hill tip, and you can see it very, very clearly, and actually from that vantage point it looks higher than the Wrekin. Now, in the conclusions on the report, it mentions about the restoration plan, and as I've pointed out, that's 25 years old. Should have been completed years ago, but because of the extensions it's not been complete, and it's been extended. So whether or not the current restoration plan is actually relevant now, I'm not too sure. I mean, we've heard that if we don't extend it and it's not full, there might be a problem with capping it. Well, it's already been extended twice, and there's been no change to the restoration plan up to now, so it shouldn't make any difference really. Now, I was a bit surprised really in the conclusion, because there was a mention accusing Telford and Wrekin of NIMBYism, and if we reject the extension it's unfair and unjustified. But the Granville's coming to the end of its life. We have excellent recycling rates, as has been acknowledged, and there's 3 years left. So the operator can increase the current tonnage that it takes for the next 3 years. There's no clear figures as to the percentage of waste that has actually come from Telford and Wrekin. And I did ask, sort of very kind, I asked for some information from officers, and he couldn't tell me because nobody seems to know. Or perhaps the operator doesn't want to tell us. But the vast majority is quite clear. It comes from outside the borough. We've been playing our part for the last 20 odd years. So to be accused of being NIMBYism and not playing our part with helping recycling is just plainly unfair and is wrong. We are playing our part, and we will continue to do that at least for the next 3 years. But enough is enough. An extension isn't justified. There isn't as much spare capacity as we're being told. There are closer sites. There are sites that are closer to where the actual waste is being generated. I mean, purely from reducing the carbon footprint of all this, surely the nearest landfill sites to where the waste is generated should be the ones that are used. It makes no sense to transport it from past alternative facilities just because Potters happen to own it. So, quite honestly, I can't see a justification. If you look at the figures say that it is filling up, and really, as far as approving any extension, I can't support it. We've got a load of new developments that have been approved by the Granville, and quite honestly, they wouldn't be going ahead if it was known that it was going to be extended. And who knows whether or not by 2030 or 2028 we're not going to be asked to extend it again. The thing is that it's a very, very, it virtually is full. Previous extensions have increased the volume that can be dumped in there, and quite honestly, we've played our part, and I think enough is enough.
Before I call you in, Peter, Ian, can you clarify for the committee that it's an extension in time, not an extension of this actual site?
I'll wait for that to pass. Yeah, so in the description of the application, you see at the top of the report, in brackets is the original description as it was in 2006, 2007. So that goes back to what the original application with now. So at that time, that was the extension to deepen and raise the profile of the site, and it also dealt with extending the time limit of the application. This application that we're dealing with today is simply for the extension of time by additional 5 years. So there's no changes to the site itself in terms of raising or extending it in any way. There's no changes to the type of material that's going there. It's all working within the existing consent and in accordance with the existing Environment Agency permit, other than to extend it by additional 5 years, as well as the request to reduce the daily allowance that goes into the site. And that was something that officers negotiated with the applicant to see if we could get a reduction to help sort of relieve that fear of a large number of vehicles going into the site on any given day. At the moment they can take 1,500 tonnes in on a single day. So reducing that hopefully reduces any sort of significant input on any single day. Just to clarify the point that was made about the landfill going up, the 2006 report that was taken to the Planning Committee emphasised that the 2 metres was in both directions, so it was going down, going up, but the top part was pretty much the capping layers. So there's a layer of clay and synthetic materials that cap the site, and that's what causes the land raise that goes on top of the site, and then the growing mediums then put on top of that as well, and that helps establish the grass and the trees that would be replaced on the site to bring it back into environment, back into nature.
Thank you, Ian.
Okay.
Yeah. Peter.
Thank you, yeah. Well, thankfully, Councillor Dugmore has ticked off a lot of the things I was going to say, as have speakers previously as well. I mean, I was at a funeral yesterday up at Red Hill, and I saw the impact of this, and I was a bit shocked, I'll be honest. But I was also shocked to find that we are still doing landfill in Telford and Wrekin when we were told there wasn't any. It was to end. And now the idea of moving something forward another 5 years shocks me, quite honestly. I won't go over the same reasons that have been said, but I think there's a moral problem here, and that is carting, be it 1,350 tonnes of waste from another country. That's what we're talking about. Bypassing places where it could go to bring it to Telford and Wrekin. That seems completely wrong. I don't see why new houses and schools should suffer because of it. Potters owe us, we don't owe them anything, let's be fair, we don't. If they don't get this, they'll have to think on and do something else. The landfill tax comes over to me as a bribe, frankly. It's there, but, you know, if you don't do this, you won't get it. Well, I think we can live without that. And the question of the Bletchley situation, I worry that it's going to be held against us as something that we can't possibly say no to this for, because it's been okayed in another area. I think the absolute moral ideas of going against the climate change crisis to move a carbon footprint full of lorries across to another country to here is totally wrong, and to me they should be having it to the end of 2025 and then cap it off and get on with it. It's not really our problem, but what it is a problem to the community around there who will have to live with it for a long time. And it's no good saying that the authorities will look over it and they're trying to make sure everything's fine. They tend not to come in until something's gone wrong. So let's not give them the opportunity. There's very little I can see. There's nothing I can see actually that says this is a good idea. To me, as with landfill, frankly, it stinks, and I cannot and would not morally put my name to it. Thank you.
Colin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Strong feelings, residents, councillors, parish councils, noise, smell, even the gunshots been mentioned in to frighten the birds away or something. And I understand it. I get it all. I wish that I didn't produce any rubbish at home. I try to tell my family and my grandchildren, eat up all. We don't have to throw anything, or don't buy anything. We wouldn't have to put anything into the green or the orange bin. But unfortunately, we do. We all do it. Rubbish is an unnecessary evil. We all just have to live with it, and with it comes the landfill sites. And I was here when this application was here the first time, and and we all questioned it. And because we don't like rubbish, I don't like rubbish anywhere. I wish we can just pack it up in a little in a little package and send it to China or somewhere, but we can't do that and pay somebody, unfortunately. But we all produce rubbish. And my question before I decide on this one, Ian, if I say no tonight to this one, what happens to our rubbish? Do we send it where? Do we close it? Is there a plan B, alternative? What happens in 6 months or a year, or what happens?
I mean, that's the point.
Tell me.
That's the point to get across councillor, because the problem is landfill is still on the waste hierarchy, and it's still a controlled method of dealing with waste.
Yeah.
Below that, you get your unauthorised dumping of waste, and then it piles up somewhere else. Because landfill is, you know, as the independent report has indicated, landfill is still a requirement. We're not in a position to have zero net waste.
Yeah.
A large majority in the country, around 45% of waste is recycled, which is great. And as I said, Telford Wrekin is up there on that. But it only does that because it can send its waste outside the borough. Okay, so we do that, and then the waste that comes back, some of it comes from Shropshire, it might even come from Telford, but it goes to Welsh pool and it gets sorted into, it goes to a waste transfer station where it's sorted into its recycled materials. So that's where it's based, Welsh pool, but it might come from different parts of the UK to go there and then get put into reuse, recycle. Anything that can't be put into those categories has to go into landfill, and that's where it goes into landfill at Granville or any other landfill that Potters may have contracts with or operate. So, but in terms of what happens to that waste, well, if we don't approve this, well then that puts pressure on the system of trying to perhaps find alternative sites, because as we can see, each site, even landfills, only have a finite amount of waste it can take either on a daily limit or a yearly limit. So and even this landfill as it is now doesn't get, because the amount we do recycle doesn't reach its limits, but we'd have to find somewhere else for it.
Yeah, my other point is, like somebody said over that 5 years or whenever is a promise that landfill sites would be eliminated. Was that some kind of a promise by the administration?
Yeah, I think the aim is to have most landfills finished by 2030.
Yeah.
But it's clear in our own policies, Telford Wrekin, that we can still support landfill, providing that there's a demonstrated need for it. It's just finding the right spaces for it. That's the key.
Okay, Colby?
Yeah.
It's I appreciate no one likes the idea of landfill, because
absolutely. This is my point.
It sits at the bottom of the waste hierarchy, but it is on the waste hierarchy, and it's still a valuable resource. And just because Telford doesn't generate a lot of the waste that goes in it, doesn't mean that it's not suddenly not important to us, because we're required, government guidance is that we have that waste relationship with other authorities across the region to be able to deal with it. So, Shropshire has an energy to waste plant. We send stuff there. We have a landfill, so stuff can go into our. I mean, a lot of it is probably construction waste or quarrying waste and things like that. There might be an element of municipal waste, but I think across the country only about 10% of municipal waste goes into landfill. So a lot of it is from other means.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you. Jane?
Very interesting. I mean, I was here at the last committee meeting when this came forward. I mean, I think the elephant in the room is the Powys in Wales, for me, the big one. And it doesn't feature heavily in this report, not as much as it did in the original report that came to committee last time, although we've had this independent assessment. But for me, it's the duty of care. We have to take that into account as an authority. However, the duty of care is very simple, because how I read it, it doesn't mean to say that we have to provide it for another country, because they can provide their own. It's very clear, planning strategically across local boundaries, the government expects joint working on areas of common interest to be diligently undertaken for the mutual benefit of neighbouring authorities. Now, I'm sure we don't have a problem with Shropshire and Staffordshire into that site. My problem is bringing it in from Powys. They didn't feature heavily in that report, the independent report that was actually done. Our neighbouring authorities, yeah, I'm sure we've got a reciprocal waste issue, I'm sure we have. We've got Granville, that's still got that capacity, and by all means work with your neighbours, but I don't feel that we should provide it for another country. And I have to say that's what came before. They transport it across our neighbouring county. However, that independent report didn't really point out the fact that what was presented to us at the first committee was heavily biased towards what was coming in from Welshpool, and you've just said yourself from all over the country. We have a duty to provide to neighbouring, but not another country. They must provide for themselves, as far as I'm concerned. And I feel that there is capacity there. We will reach it at some point, but how many extensions are we going to have to do that? We do need that waste element. We do need to have that there. I think the commercial decision is by Potters to use that and to ask for this expansion, and I think they'll continue to do so. So I think at some point we've got to say, do you know what? No, possibly not. We'll deal with our neighbouring counties.
Jim?
Two things that come highly to mind from things that have been said. 5 years left. Is it? No, we've got 3 years left. Then you're going to cap it.
No, it gets capped. If consent was granted for the extension, it would get. Presuming that it does get.
So
completed.
what you're saying, if we say no tonight, Potters in 3 years' time won't cap off. They'll just walk away.
It all depends if they're able to. What I've tried to explain is that there's a lot of technical information that's needed to provide that, and at the moment, what is approved in terms of restoration scheme relies on the landfill being filled to its capacity, and then the capping layers go on top of that, and then it gets worked.
Right. What is the capacity? Who defines the capacity?
Well, that's all based on the. I haven't got that information.
No, it's already been passed on twice. We've extended, so we've obviously gone over the capacity at that time. So why can't it be capped? The second thing, there's gas escapes. That is in the report, methane, but that's glossed over that it's from coal. Granville was a mine, coal mine, so there's going to be methane come up through that. Land slippage, water infiltration, that to me is a recipe for disaster. I go back to Aberfan in Wales. They were capping off or messing on a mine there. They were told there were slippages. It was never implicated, pushed to the fore or looked at. A school got buried. Hundreds of children died. We're looking at putting more houses and a school in that area. Are the same things going to happen in a later date because of this land slippage through water infiltration? You can't answer that to me, neither can Potters or anybody else. And for me, if we go over the 3 years to the 5 years, we are creating another Aberfan disaster of its type.
Can I just clarify, Councillor? The risk of that type of thing of an odd landform being created is if we close the landfill early. If we allow it to be completed, then it gets done in a way that's controlled by the Environment Agency and ensures that the risk of water seepage, land slippage, gas escape, that's all controlled as approved through the Environment Agency. So actually it's the opposite way around. This allowing it gets us to a point where we can have more surety that the final landfill form will be safe.
Why am I hearing all the things that history have proved happened at Aberfan? They were told, oh, we'll cap it, we'll do it, and it was left, and it happened. and then it was a big hoo-ha.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't proceed.
Jim, Aberfan is totally different to this waste tip. The Aberfan was colliery waste, which was built up over the years and built up over the spring actually.
I know what it was done on.
But this is not a spring. This is actually municipal waste.
We have got the same issue coming.
But it's controlled by the Environment Agency.
With water infiltration.
So was Aberfan.
The situation's completely changed.
If you want to make a comment,
through you, Chair, the situation's completely changed. The situation in Wales was horrendous, it was awful. But the situation has changed because there was no Environment Agency at that point. There was no proper regulation at that point. This particular site has been regulated by a separate permit process through the Environment Agency, and it's controlled through the Environment Agency. So you cannot make basically a similarity between the two. And I actually question whether it's material even in planning terms.
The capping layers are devised in such a way to stop those things happening, and if we stop the site early, that what happens with the site is just hypothetical. We don't know how the site would react to not being filled and being capped properly.
That comes back to the question: who decides what is the full capacity?
Well, that will be based on the final landfill form that's already been approved. So as an authority, we have already approved the final restoration scheme.
So that's approved to 3 years' time.
That's approved to
3 years' time.
That's approved based on the landfill being filled.
At 3 years, as it was for 3 years' time.
If it could be filled in 3 years' time and completed, but what Potters are saying to us is we can't do that in 3 years' time. We need an extra 5 years to be able to complete that project.
Potters are saying. Yeah. It was done 2018, was it, when the other company pulled out because they decided enough was enough. Then Potters come in and now they say, oh, we can put more in there. I'm sorry, it doesn't feed to me.
Again, just a clarification, there's no more going into the site than was originally permitted. It is getting to that approved restoration scheme, and that's
what I'm saying. To 3 years' time and no more.
Jim, can you listen to some of the answers before you come back? I know you're there, and I know you're passionate about this, and I know you. But I think we need to get back to a balanced debate.
Yeah. Well, somebody else have the say now.
No, you can have your say, Jim.
I've said what I'm thinking and my feelings.
Okay, fine. Bob.
This is always going to be an emotive subject, isn't it? Of who lives and what's there. It's the first time I think I've ever heard Wales referred to as a country. No, it isn't a country. It's a principality. It is not a country. Wales is not
responsible for their own waste.
Well, yeah, but Ian, sorry, I understand what you're saying, and tell me if I'm right. That if this 5 years gets allowed, there's no increase in the amount of rubbish going into this tip that wasn't agreed earlier. In fact, there could be. Is it true? It could be that if it reached its capacity before the 5 years was up, it would automatically stop. They wouldn't be able to carry on and say, well, we've got 3 more years left and we want to put some more in. We want to build it bigger than the Wrekin and let's go for brown clay. Let's beat brown clay. So you're right. No more rubbish is going to go into this site than what was agreed for when it was going to end in 3 years. It's just we're not going to get to that level within the 3 years.
That's correct, yes. So what was approved cannot be achieved within the time period. They need an extra 5 years to get to that point. Okay. No additional waste is proposed to go in there.
So if they reach the maximum before the 5 years is up,
yep,
it will then automatically close and be capped.
Yep. Yeah, because each cell is created, so the way a landfill is formed is in different cells. So each cell is formed, and then it's filled, and then it's capped. And part of the site has already been restored. So the Norman stockpile has already had the restoration scheme partly restored.
Right.
And,
So that,
and then this will all connect into that.
right. So, and that's right. That's why I understand you saying. I have a concern that could be that after the 5 years, 2030, there's still some capacity left to fill, and our potter's going to come back and say, we want to extend again because we haven't actually filled it up totally.
Yeah. I understand that concern. Again, it's not a finite science, but 5 years gives a lot more accuracy than 25 years. So it's more than likely that within that time period that it will be filled based on the current rates of landfill.
Is it possible for us to say you get your 5 years extra, but you don't get a day more, and after that 5 years, it's got to be capped?
We can't condition it in that way. It wouldn't be reasonable the legal officer, to make them not have the ability to reapply again. So we can't do that as an authority. We have to be accurate in our conditions, but we can only say you've got to close it by the year 2030. It doesn't stop potters going back and asking for a further revision, but that would have to be reconsidered at that time and reconsidered by members, and obviously there'd be the minutes of this discussion and the officer reports of this discussion, and that would all be very relevant if that was to happen at the time.
Okay. Can I now talk about this moving waste across boroughs and across from Wales? If we would say, well, we don't want it coming here, but to do that, people say, well, you're not going to bring out the waste that we're shown in the report to be an excellent authority. However, in brackets, because we'll spend loads of it somewhere else. So the argument is saying we can't let it come from there to Telford, but we still want to carry on taking ours from Telford to there. It just doesn't make sense. It's got to be, if we had to deal with all our own rubbish, if we decided we don't want rubbish coming from other places, therefore as an authority, morally, we don't want to send any of our rubbish anywhere else. What happens with all the rubbish that's in Telford that we now have to keep because morally, because we don't want other people bringing to us, we're going to say we're not going to send ours anywhere else? What will happen, Ian, to our recycling rates, and where will our rubbish actually go?
Well, at the moment we've got a contract with Viola to send it to their sites. It would be, it's quite a hypothetical question because we just don't really know what would happen. It could be that someone comes along, or Viola come along, and they want to build a waste to energy plant in Telford. But again, that's very hypothetical.
But it's not there, is it? It's not there at the moment.
No, it's not there at the
so
moment.
What we'd be
again, like you say about in Paris or in Multiple, Potters run a waste transfer station.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
So it's not just Welsh waste; it's waste also from.
It's some of our waste actually goes there, and then comes back and goes into our landfill.
Paris, but then it gets sorted there, so it's a sorting station. It just happens to be based in Multiple, and then it gets anything that can't be recycled or reused has to go somewhere.
I'm just trying to show that this argument of saying we shouldn't be taking somebody else's, but in fact we are giving ours to somebody else.
That's the and that in terms of municipal waste.
Yes,
that's
yes,
the situation.
yes.
It doesn't relate to all waste because commercial waste will have different contracts and that, and they might have different companies that deal with their waste. Granville does take some commercial waste from Telford. I know that, but then that's hard to quantify because again it gets sorted at waste transfer stations and then gets put on lorries. Gets put back
I just think morally you can't have one side of the argument and not the other, and the system will only work if we do take other people's so that it can come there. And we're not increasing the amount of rubbish that's going in there. It's just going to take longer to fill it up.
It's not, and again, as I've mentioned previously, it's all part of that waste relationship between authorities, and that's clear in government guidance that we must do that. We must work with different authorities to enable an efficient dealing with.
Okay,
with waste
and all these things about smell and things. Am I right? That's not to do with Telford Wrekin. It's to do with the Environmental Agency. They're the people who make sure that the tip is run to the conditions that they have in their licence.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Want to come back?
Yeah. I mean, we have been taking other people's waste for the last 20 odd years, so I think we've done our bit. But anyway, they just on the landslides. I mean, there have been land slippages in the Granville, and due to the variety of streams and everything that are in there, so it is quite relevant. The main question I've got, because we keep going on about when it's going to be capacity, right? Now then the thing is that what measure are we using? Are we using volume or are we using weight? Because if you've got a lot of heavy waste, well then it's not going to take up an awful lot of volume. Therefore, when you come to cap it, technically it might not look very full, but it is, because you've used waste as what you're measuring the capacity of. Alternatively, you can go the other way, and it's the volume in which case you could have lots of light waste, and you could have and you could have lots and lots of vehicles arriving with light waste. So what is the measure? Is it the tonnage or is it the volume? Because the thing is that as you said, you've said that when it gets capped, if it's got to be capped correctly, or else it doesn't work and it won't be safe. Now then the thing is that you've got to be clear on what you're measuring for capacity.
The only thing I'll be measuring the capacity on is getting to that final landfall, and how that's filled is down to the operator.
Because you see, the thing is that you could have you could fill up the volume so that it is full. Physically, it's full, but tonnage-wise, it still could have extra capacity.
But yeah, so it's not based on tonnage. It's just getting to that final landfill form.
So how do we measure when it's full?
When it gets to the levels that are required to cap it.
So is that volume or weight?
Well, it's not weight, it'll be volume, won't it? It'll be the amount of material that
so
goes
it's
in.
volume?
Yeah.
Because all the figures in the report are all based on tonnage.
That's
tonnage.
That's because it's talking about how much the site can, how much we as an authority have permitted it to take in any given year or on any given day. So that's just part of the conditions that are being approved by the authority. So we've allowed the site to take up to 200,000 tonnes per year.
So it's a bit open-ended then, the life of a site then, isn't it? Because it's just...
It could vary on a number of factors, but a lot of waste that goes in is certain types of waste, and yes, it's going to fill it in different ways. You say it's be lightweight or heavyweight, but then there's going to be a certain amount that is the same size of material that goes in. It's baled or put into compacted in a certain way.
Depends what it is, doesn't it? Really? So the thing is that we could be on a never-ending cycle. It could never be full.
The report says tonnes.
Metric tonnes.
But the extension was volume.
No, it's metric tonnes in the report, and that's what we're working on. Okay, Jane.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming back on this one. I mean, who does decide when it's reached that landscaping and for capacity? Because obviously, it's got to be visual, hasn't it? If it's not, I mean, granted it offers tons in there, but it's volume. So who decides? Environment Agency, local planning authority, Potters?
Well,
Who decides when you've reached
we've
that?
already approved the restoration scheme, and as have the Environment Agency in terms of their processes. Potters have to agree.
Well, what triggers? What will trigger that? Who triggers it? Is it the local authority? Is it the Environment
Well, that'll be
Agency?
Potters
Is it
working
Potters?
with Potters working with the Environment Agency to say, well, this cell is now at its capacity. They'll create that cell, and then it'll be ready to put its capping materials on top of it.
So it is up to the company then whether they, right.
But it will be full at a certain. Well, it will be full at a certain point. So that's
No guarantee there.
No.
No guarantee that it'll stop in when it's going to stop.
What I've tried to explain is that 5 years is a more realistic prospect than a longer period. Otherwise, they might have asked for a 10-year extension to it. The Potters have considered, with the type and the amount of waste that's going into the site, that 5 years is a reasonable extension to what they need to complete the site in order to create that restoration scheme.
Yeah, just a quick one, because I think we're all slowly losing the will to live on this one, aren't we? Is there no way that Potters could continue to try to complete by 2025? Because we're getting a carrot dangled at us now that says it could close sooner. Well, why not work to 2025? And then they say to us, actually, we only need another 18 months, or whatever it is. Rather than grant 5 years, which they will probably work to. There must be a system they can put in place that can still have this done and capped off by 2025.
The issue with that is Potter's own contracts, where the waste that they're dealing with comes from, and as we can see that I'm sure if they could, they'd want to reach it as soon as possible, but they can't.
But if we make it clear to them
that's an example across the country.
That's our aim as a borough.
Yeah.
Our aim is that you finish it by 2025 and then come back to us if you fail to do that, and we'll look at it again, rather than say we'll give you an open-ended extra 5 years, because that's what it seems to be. So really they should be able to do more in the shorter time.
Well, they're telling us not, and what we're dealing with here today is a request to extend it for a further 5 years.
Right.
And as I've tried to explain, that there's valid reasons why they couldn't do it by 2025, the closure of the site, reduced amounts, and so on.
I understand what you're saying, but like with Veolia get rid of waste for money. No other reason. They don't do it for our benefit or their benefit, they do it for money. And so do Potters. Now, if Potters thought they could lose out on this post-2025, they'd get their finger out and they'd do something different. And they've got a chance to do that without us saying no as such to another 5 years, because they can come back to us in 2025 and say, right, this is the position now, because I feel there's far too much supposition about what may happen, and there's been so much supposition since the year dot when it all first started. So we really are on a strong footing, I believe, to say to them, carry on till 2025, then come back to us and we'll revisit it and we'll see what the need is. I think that's a much more sensible way forward.
The trouble with leaving it, for any company, leaving something so late, is that they need to arrange their contracts of who they do, their commercial contracts of who they deal waste with. So if you leave it to the last minute, it might not be viable for them.
That's not our problem, though, is it? Really?
You're just going backwards and forwards over the same question, and they're never going to get a proper answer, because we're considering the 5-year extension here now.
Right, okay, all right, I get you, but as I say, I think there's a point to this, and that is it doesn't need to be an extra 5 years.
That's
a
valid point.
Yeah, I'll say no more, thank you.
From your point of view.
Yeah.
Val wants to come in, because I'm winding the debate up now.
Just to clarify though, just to remind members in terms of what you're considering this evening is an extension of time to complete the already approved scheme. The approved scheme in terms of the amount of capacity that the landfill is taking is already there, and it's a decision that this council's already made. And a second one is in terms of that restoration plan, that's already met. What members are considering is the time frame in which they can complete that. Potters have come to us with stating that they can't complete it within the existing time period. because there have been periods of closure, because of how it's been previously run. There's also an issue in terms of then thinking around our hierarchy of our waste regimes. And as a country, we're trying to do different things in terms of measures, in terms of not to produce waste at the very outset. Then we move down in terms of recycling, or preparing to reuse equipment and products. Then we recycle, then we recover it, and then eventually, if we can't do any of those, we have to dispose of them. And that will be through landfill as part of that. We can't consider where the waste is coming from. We as a council have our own regime in terms of where the council has its own contracts for. But other authorities have their own, and so do commercial aspects. The country as a whole is trying to limit the amount of landfill. So new landfill may be considered in a completely different vein, but what we are considering here is just how to complete this one and how to finish it appropriately. And just the commercial group has approached us to consider this application specifically to allow them to do that, knowing what contracts they've got coming through and how long that they need to do that to fulfil the existing consent. So your decision will not implicate in terms of where waste goes from this authority or where other authorities go from. What you're doing is considering the implications of finalising that landfill. And that's what members need to be clear on in terms of then, if you're looking at other reasons as to why not to approve that, you need to keep it within that parameter. Members, part of that negotiation, coming forward and saying, okay, we need an additional 5 years on top of the consent that we've already had to complete this development, will reduce how much comes through those doors on an annual basis. And that's what officers have negotiated in terms of that per annum tonnage that goes through that. That will then reduce how much is on the roads that are around it. And that's part of that negotiation and balance that officers have achieved. So members, you're considering an application only to vary the conditions for a time frame period, as well as that offset of the number through the site. What you're not considering is whether it can be capped or how it can be capped or issues around land stability. Those are all issues which have already been considered and approved through the restoration plan. Right. What we will point out though is that restoration plan is unlikely to be achieved because if the time periods are not given because of how Potters have presented their case to us to date. We've had an independent assessment that's reviewed it since members questioned officers' previous opinions, and that's been set out both in the report and made publicly available.
Thank you, Val. We're not going to have the debate again on what Val has said. We've had a damn good debate tonight, over an hour talking backwards and forwards, and we could talk for weeks on it. So we're now going to move to the vote.
I move the recommendation.
You move the recommendation. Is there a seconder for that? There's a seconder for that. All those in favour of the recommendation in the report, please show. One. You don't get a vote.
No, I was just counting.
Oh, there's 2, 3. There's 2. Those against? Any abstentions? I'm afraid that is lost. Then
so the recommendation is not carried.
The recommendation is not carried at all. No.
So then we need a decision in terms of where Chair you would like this to go in terms of if it's a refusal and then the reasons for refusal.
Well, the reason for the refusal need to be outlined now so we can know where to go. We have to have a good reason for refusing. So those who refuse, why has it been refused? We have to then decide where we're going to go with it.
Well, it's been refused because some of us don't believe that another 5 years is a good thing for the area where the landfill is. And we also believe, and I certainly believe, that if they were given the option to, one of the better words, pull their finger out on it, they could get a lot done by 2025. I think and it may not be correct, if you were, for want of a better word, to say that we're concerned about the amount of lorries, etc., on the road. That is a damn good reason in the minds of people. But in terms of this, because it's been extended so many times, and at times it's been left and neglected for a couple of years when nothing was done, that's not the fault of this borough. That's not the fault of this authority. We need to be stronger in terms of when we expect this landfill to finish. It seems to me it's only for the benefit of Potters that it goes on for another 5 years. So,
Peter, we need a planning reason for turning it down.
Okay.
Well, the first thing is it's not required because the original capacity has already been surpassed because of the extensions, and therefore there are other facilities nearby, and we don't. Well, I certainly don't believe that it won't have been filled by 2025, and the figures that are in your own report indicate that as well. So if you look at them carefully, just crunch the figures. It's all in there for you. Now, then the thing is that it doesn't support our carbon neutral and our climate change policy, which is to reduce transportation and make sure that we're minimising the carbon footprint within the borough, and for the rest of the country as well. It's contributing to that. The restoration plan needs to be reviewed because it's not fit for purpose, because it was actually compiled 20 odd years ago prior to the 2 extra extensions, and also another reason is the adverse impact on residents. The existing residents have had enough of it, and we as a planning authority have approved lots of residential developments around this landfill, which it's not our fault that it's taken so long for them to come forward. It's nothing to do with us, but we've approved it, and certainly those developments wouldn't be going ahead in the shape or form that they are now if we'd have known that the landfill was going to continue for another 12, 13, 14, 15 years.
Yeah. In terms of the climate change policies, whilst we've declared a climate change emergency, we haven't got any new policies that have come through as a supporting document in terms of SPDs or anything else in terms of the local plan. The local plan is adopted, and the evidence base does recognise the need for the landfill and the capacity that it would take. So I haven't got a policy around climate change really in terms of that I can support for reasons for refuse, or in terms of the mechanisms around the transport and around where that manoeuvres from and to. We haven't got any, there's certainly no grounds for refusal there from a policy perspective. There's no evidence that's submitted in terms of that anything would be any different to what's already there. It's already an approved scheme. So in terms of as a capacity side of it, appreciating there's been extensions, that capacity's been approved.
Well, it's still the argument over what classifies as capacity. So I think we need to speak to the Environment Agency and find out what their classification is.
For refusals from what Councillor Dubner has said.
I'm probably thinking in the same way as you, to be honest. I'm struggling with what's been said because in relation to capacity, I don't think there is a case there at all. Because that's been something which has been policed by the Environment Agency and also by the local planning authority. Perhaps the only argument there might be impact on residents and on future residents, possibly.
Yeah.
That's perhaps.
That is that as an authority we've approved those schemes, knowing that there's a active landfill nearby, and we've several years to go.
Yeah, but we got it set.
But there's still going to be occupations within that time, and within even within 3 years, there's going to be occupations. So in terms of impact on those residents, that was assessed at the time and not seen to be an issue.
But having said at that time,
Hang on, Jim. We're going to go round and round on this one if we're not careful. the impact on residents, on future residents, is that the development on the scheme is going to be nearer. The last parts are going to be right by the tip. Those are the last parts going to be right by the tip. Therefore, the impact on future residents is a valid argument for turning it down on planning grounds, because it's we do know that development is being done in stages, as all of the big ones are, and the last two are right near the tip, exactly, and you are going to be having vehicles coming in, tipping, while new people are coming into there. Therefore, it is an impact on future residents, and that is a valid reason that we can turn it down.
That includes the impact of the health, potentially.
It's the impact of it.
And what about the impact of the highways of Telford and Wrekin?
Well, the impact on the highways authority have said they can cope with the extra traffic and also the development, but it's the impact on the residents, not right up to by the tip. And you mentioned earlier on to somebody tonight about what happened in Newcastle under Lyme, and on that tip there. Just to prove I was listening to you, Nigel. That was a different one. That's the Environment Agency doing that one. But this, in fact, is actually building a land raise right next to houses. So it is the impact on those things. And I think that's a valid reason for doing it down.
Which is the crux of what these people said when they spoke. Exactly that. So we've got at least there a reason to it. But really, the type of application this is sometimes makes me wonder why you put it in front of a committee of people who represent residents, because you're not necessarily going to get the answer you want, I don't think, on this one, because of that.
Peter, is our democracy.
Yes.
And we sometimes do things that residents don't want.
Of course we do.
And this is one where we may be right.
Universally don't want, is it?
But that's the development that's taking place next door to the tip.
Okay, well we've got a reason, a good reason, a valid reason to say no, because what's the alternative now? We have to change our minds?
No.
I'm not trying to change members' opinion on this.
You won't.
But I know you've already heard it. I know. But just in terms of those reasons for refusal, you've got to think that we've approved those residential developments in that location, and there's still a further 3 years left on that consent. So in terms of impact upon the lifestyles of those residents, that's already been considered. So you've got to make a strong argument that we can defend as officers to say that adding the additional 5 years is going to have a worse impact upon those residents than if it was 3 years.
Question: Are they going to live
on the finance and value of the properties?
Visual amenity.
Are they going to live next to a tip for 2 years or 7 years? That's the difference, isn't it?
Just a minute. We're going back and forwards again. We're going to have all the arguments again. What we actually need now is a resolution confirming that we turn it down and the reason we turn it down.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. I'll move it.
Somebody, you move that, will you?
Yeah.
Move it then, go on.
Move it. I move the resolution that we turn it down.
You move that we turn it down, and the reason for turning it down is
impact on residents, the
impact on future residents.
Flaws in the restoration plan.
Chair, there's no flaws in the restoration.
There aren't any plan, Chair. No. The restoration plan is flawed. What we're saying is it's the impact on the development for future residents.
Okay. Yeah.
And their health.
And the health and quality of life.
That's residential amenity is something that's tangible from a planning perspective. The issues in regard to health are not controlled by the planning authority. If there's anything in terms of environmental pollution, that's dealt with through the Environment Agency, and there is no evidence of that.
But it's been moved that we turn it down on the grounds of the impact on future residents.
is in terms of future residents or existing residents, Chair?
Future and existing.
Yeah, existing and future residents, yeah.
And so we need that motion and the
Oh,
we needed seconded.
yeah.
who's going to second that? It's been seconded there. All those in favour of the motion, please show. We'll turn it down. We just confirmed that we turn it down. Any abstentions? One abstention. Okay. Well, that concludes that. We've rejected that extension. Okay.
Just to point it out, we also need to say what the impact is. Is it going to be a significant impact? So I've just got the policy in front of me.
Okay.
So
I'm just going to have to go with it.
You've got to
Just have to go with it.
well, we've got impact, so we can draw information.
Thank you, Stuart. Right. Time is marching on. Gemma, thank you for that's what I'm calling it. Right. As I said, we would continue doing item 6 as it's printed in the order paper. So 6.2 is the land at the rear of 135 137 Hadley Park Road, and that's TWC 2022 0291, and it's on page 35 to 54. Who's doing this one? Sorry? Robin. Sorry, Robin. I didn't say I was doing this one. You were quiet.
It's okay. Sorry, I was looking at the location planning.
Oh, right.
Swapped into,
okay, Robin.
0291.
Just introduce it. And
Okay.
then we'll have a public speaker when you've introduced it.
So, this is an outline planning application for the erection of one dwelling with all matters reserved. The application site comprises a parcel of land that extends from between 133 and 135 Hadley Park Road and incorporates a wider parcel of land between the rear gardens of 135 and 137 Hadley Park Road, and then extends back towards the rear gardens of number 8 and 9 Park Court. Since the preparation of the report, one additional representation of support has been received. The representation raises no new matters but states that the proposal would discourage antisocial behaviour on this plot and would improve the appearance of its overgrown state. It's the officer's recommendation that the application be granted outline planning permission.
Thank you, Robin. We have two speakers on this one. Councillor Stuart Parr. You've got 3 minutes, Stuart.
Thank you. You putting your timer up, or shall I just go? Okay. So, I hope you've all read the submission by the Parish Council, because I'm not going to just read it word for word. I will summarise, and this is the view of Hadley Montgomery Parish Council's Planning Committee. So the first objection from the Parish Council was that this is a garden development and it goes against the Council's policy on garden developments. So I think a statement has been made that this particular part of land has never formed the gardens, part of the gardens of the properties in question, but historic ordnance survey maps show that that land actually has historically been part of the gardens of those properties. So that was the one reason. The other main reason that the Parish Council objected to this was the access to the site. The access to this site is a strip of unregistered land between the two properties in question. Now, as you exit between the two properties, the front gardens are bounded by fairly tall walls that would obscure your view. As a driver trying to exit the site, the pavement's quite narrow. Certainly wouldn't be allowed to build a pavement that narrow under current planning regulations. The sort of upshot of that is that as you exit from that strip of land, that the nose of your car in most cases would be protruding out into the road onto Hadley Park Road before you're able to see around those garden walls. So obviously visibility display there. There's a bus stop on Hadley Park Road that is immediately adjacent to the access from this site. As in, it's in line with the exit, so if a bus is stopped there, you won't be able to see to your left. Hadley Park Road's actually quite a fast road. It's only got a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. There is a speeding problem on that road. The fastest speed recorded on there on one of the Parish Council's SIDs was somewhere in the region of 90 miles an hour. Obviously exceptional, but these things do happen. So the access, the strip of land used as the access is currently used by properties that are already there. However, the council has never made an affirmative statement that using that strip of land to access and egress is actually safe, but in approving this planning application would be making that statement that that access is safe. Just finally, so neighbouring properties, and myself included in fact, I live fairly close to it, would like to see that strip of land put to good use, because it does attract vermin, and in the past it's attracted antisocial behaviour. However, it does need to be done safely, and it was the opinion of the planning committee that the access and egress was not safe. I've gone 3 minutes. Okay.
Thank you, Stuart. Mrs. Dawn, please. Is it Mrs. Dawn Telford or?
It's Dawn Telford, yes.
Good
evening, ladies and gentlemen
Dawn.
of the committee.
I wasn't quite certain it's on the paper. No.
Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of AC Development. AC Development of Telford, they acquired the cottages of numbers 135 and 137 and the derelict piece of land to the rear in 2021. Since that date, they've renovated the 2 cottages, 135 and 137, and these were derelict and dilapidated, so they've brought them back into community use, and they're now, I believe, tenanted. A planning application was submitted to develop the derelict and the neglected land at the rear by Mr. J. Tiara, a director of AC Development, and he negotiated with the local authority in respect of the application that's now in front of the committee. You will all be aware that the local planning authority support this application, as all of the policies have been satisfied, and indeed the Highways Committee also support this application, and the points that my friend from the Parish Council has raised have been addressed in detail within the report. With regard to the local planning authority, they have investigated and they've completed what I call a comprehensive and thorough appraisal of the site, and they reached the decision that they would support this application. AC Development have always been committed to being transparent in all of their negotiations and communications with the local authority, planning authority, and with the immediate residents, who've also expressed their support for this application. And I understand that 2 of those residents are present here tonight in support. These plans will bring a derelict piece of land back into use, into the local community, and provide affordable accommodation for local people, and this is much needed in this area. With it being a bungalow, that would also include elderly and disabled people would also have the opportunity of acquiring that property. We would like to bring to your attention that the right-of-way between numbers 135 and 137 has been in place since at least 1961, when it was granted by a Mr. Bromley, and it's been used on a daily basis since. If this application is successful, it will benefit from off-road parking for 2 vehicles with ample manoeuvrability, so that any time that the vehicles leave the area, they will be facing forward. With this in mind, no vehicle will need to park on the public highway. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dawn. Back to you, Robin.
So the main considerations of this application are the principle of development and highway safety, albeit it's important to note that the application is made in outline, so all matters are reserved. So the site lies within the Telford urban boundary, where the principle of development is supported. The application has demonstrated through the submission of an illustrative proposed block plan and an illustrative floor plan and elevations that a single-storey, two-bedroom dwelling and associated amenity space could be adequately accommodated within the application site. And that would meet NDSS standards as well. So whilst the development does consist of backland development, which is typically resisted, on balance, the proposal would not negatively impact upon the character and appearance of the area, does not disrupt the historic pattern of development as it was not associated with any existing plot, and does not impact the amenity of neighbouring properties or the proposed host property. The proposal is therefore in general accordance with policy BE1, subject to compliance with the conditions to control the development to being single-storey and control the principles of the general layout, considering it's made in outline. So a number of representations have raised concerns around highway safety of the access point. The access road currently serves numbers 135 and 137 Hadley Park Road, as well as the other properties that have a right-of-way over this land in their deed. As such, the land at the rear currently benefits from unrestricted access to and from Hadley Park Road. So it'd be feasibly possible for the landowner to park up to 5 vehicles on this plot of land, and these vehicles would benefit from unrestricted movements during the day and night over this existing access. The local planning authority has considered that the introduction of one dwelling effectively restricts the use of this land, resulting in a betterment of the overall use of this access point from the existing position. So the decision maker should consider this fallback position in the assessment of highway safety. The local highways authority has reviewed the proposal and supports the application subject to conditions in respect to the details of the surface of the car parking spaces and access road. So to conclude, officers consider that the proposal is compliant with policy BE1 and C3 of the local plan, and the recommendation to committee is to grant outline planning permission subject to conditions as listed in the committee report.
Thank you, Robin. Gemma?
So just a couple of questions. On 8.7.1 it mentions the TPO with the tree. So have we had further clarification on whether that tree was removed as part of the Park Court development?
We've not had confirmation from the tree officers in relation to that matter, but in relation to the decision of this application, we've considered that it's not material because there is sufficient space in that corner if it needed to, if we required it to be replanted. Yeah.
Okay. And then around the conditions, obviously there's still details that need to be submitted. Do we foresee anything that would be any cause for concern with the things that haven't been submitted as part of the conditions?
So no, nothing of concern that's been highlighted from statutory consultees. Obviously drainage is conditioned, and the surfacing of the road has been conditioned by the local highway authority, and then obviously because this application is made an outline, if it were to progress then they need to submit a reserve matters dealing with details of appearance, scale, layout, landscaping and access. So all the detailed matters need to be considered at a further application.
We don't foresee any problems with regards to right of way over the deeds of the land anyway, as it stands with properties, because there's bungalows that sit at the back of.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually been down to do a site visit, and I can actually say that once we've if they can't oversee any problems with regards to conditions or right of way, and obviously if we need to replant a tree and wherever it comes down, it is actually brought the area and the whole environment back up to a standard that's habitable. I know why, because I nearly broke my neck about 4 years ago actually, trying to deliver some post. But so from that point of view, from a highways perspective, I think that road in general, there is an issue around speeding, and that is across the whole of the road from one end to the other, which again is a cause of concern of people trying to get out, because when people try and get out of Park Court, because you've got the shops there, and there is double yellows on the corner, but people tend to park there. But other than that, I can't see any reason not to.
Jane.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not that familiar with the area, but obviously I've read all the comments. I mean, it does concern me that obviously when you grant outline, you've granted a reason to develop it. The problem is that access is never going to change. I mean, you can't put visibility displays in. That would be a normal requirement. It does worry me about listening to what the response was and listening to the comments from the parish council, and you know, they're on site, they know what the area's like. There's this bus stop that's directly by it. That's really difficult to get to negotiate, and I know you're saying, oh well, that can be part of your reserve matters. It's a little bit late when you've granted outline for it. This is why I'm highlighting it. It's okay saying with conditions, but they need to be there, they need to be enforced. I mean, you know, we've got some things here that said it's been agreed, but they haven't yet been submitted, so we're a bit in the dark on that one.
Yeah, in relation to the access, so this is what I sort of tried to highlight in my speech. So the fallback position is that is an unrestricted access point at this current point in time. So 135 and 137, they previously had garages at the rear. Now it's proposed for them to have tandem car parking spaces, so that position doesn't change. The other properties along Hadley Park Road could technically use this plot of land, I suppose, to park their cars if the landowner allowed it, and then they could use that as a sort of unrestricted to come.
What is the width measurement? Because I couldn't quite.
6 metres.
It is 6 metres then.
I think it's at least 5.5. Yeah.
Oh, it's 5.5 at the narrowest. The only thing is, I'm thinking that we should bear in mind. Obviously, I'm very familiar with this, with representing more the area. Right. Obviously, that looks actually bigger than that, doesn't it? Looking on that photograph, but it's visitor parking. So yes, there's enough parking spaces within those for the 2-bedroom properties there for 35 and 37, and obviously the 2 spaces for the 2-bedroom bungalow. But you're going to have visitor spaces, and I just wondered whether that was wide enough to accommodate 2 vehicles that they could actually pass, because that's going to cause an issue, isn't it? And I don't know whether that's achievable.
I did that today.
Did you?
Yeah.
Was it achievable?
Yeah.
Oh, that's all right. There we are. It's useful asking the question, but
yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, this backland development, it says it's usually resisted. So, on what grounds is it usually resisted? That would be useful to know. I mean, I've got concerns over the visibility display. I mean, the garden walls are not associated with 137. 135 and 137. They're actually with 131 and 133. So there's not much we can do about that. I mean, as far as the mention of the bus stop, I mean, really, that should be a condition that the bus stop is moved, and that nothing can go ahead until it's been moved. Because, you know, that could have quite serious implications, particularly if, for instance, you've got somebody who perhaps an emergency vehicle needs to get to the bungalow, and you've got a bus in the way, you've got people getting off. There's all sorts of things could happen, and so that is quite a serious concern of mine. There's mention in the report of Japanese knotweed on the site. Has that been investigated and has been confirmed that there isn't any on site? Because obviously that has implications. And I'd be quite interested to know, so how many actual properties have access down there? And the thing is that do those properties that do have access, do they currently use vehicles going down there? Because if they do, and they're not going to be able to put vehicles down there once this property is built, so where are their vehicles going to go? And that might increase the amount of vehicles parking actually on Hadley Park Road or wherever. And as we've heard, there are sort of issues with parking and speeding down there. So that would be those are my major concerns. I mean the site itself, you know, sort of, yes, it does need a tidy up and all the rest of it. It looks like that, but I think we might be making a rod for our own back with this, and perhaps there could be other uses of the land that might be safer for residents. The other thing is, just before I finish, as Councillor Offland declared an interest, because she is actually a ward member.
She wasn't here at the time, though. I think that's what it was, isn't it? When asked. She came later.
She wasn't at the very start of the meeting.
No, I know.
But she declared interest that she's part of that Hadley Parish Council, but she has not discussed it.
Right, okay. Sorry, I must be going deaf.
Yeah, well, she hadn't discussed it at all. Well, you ought to know by now, Nigel.
Well, I've
just read out on these things.
Yeah,
that's why she couldn't speak in the
just
previous
don't want
debates.
people to erroneously break the rule.
Peter.
Thank you. Yeah. I can see a bungalow there quite easily, actually. I think it would improve the land itself. I don't see any problem with that at all. I do think moving the bus stop is a good idea. I mean, that should be investigated. It can be done along that road. It doesn't have to be in that spot, because I do recognise I went in there and I was parked alongside another car that was there, and I actually reversed out. But I could see the potential for the bus stop. I didn't have any problem, I'll be honest. However, the bus stop would get in people's way if you're coming out either forward or backwards. There was a couple of cars there. Is that, do you know, is that assumed parking because there's a space there, or is that 133 or 135 or whatever they are, 137? And if so, what is the plan for those people?
So, 135 and 137, those semi-detached at the front. So there was garages at the rear. I don't know if they've been demolished yet, but so it's proposed for them to have tandem parking at the rear, so they'll have private parking. Some properties along Hadley Park Road, yeah, most of them park on the street. To be honest, as you'll see, there's usually quite a lot of street parking, and that won't change. They just, within their deed, they have a right to use that.
But do you know who it is that parks there at the moment? It looked like they were...
No, I don't know. No.
It might be an idea to consider no parking in that particular space, and that way it would be a lot safer. But I can't see any reason why something like a bungalow couldn't go there. It seems perfectly reasonable. It's a decent space. And yeah, my biggest concern would be moving the bus stop, because I think that would help tremendously in terms of the vision splay, without a doubt. But I have no real objection to this, because it's like any other space of its type. The two roads that were built either side would have had the same problems in terms of coming out and going in. So overall, I don't see any reason why it shouldn't proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any other comments? Bob?
Can I just ask you, where do the people who live in 129, 131 and 133, where do they park? It doesn't look as though there's any designated parking to do with their property. So do they park on? They just park on the road
street, yeah.
at the moment.
Yeah.
So they're already causing a blockage for anybody who wants to come out.
Yes.
Of that piece of land.
Yeah, but that's the existing. Yeah, that's the existing situation.
Thank you.
Any further comments?
Just have answers to the questions, please.
Yeah, in terms of the backland point that you made, obviously sometimes it's resisted on grounds that it would negatively impact the character of the area, or there would be instances where there'd be inadequate separation distances, but that's why we've asked the applicant to submit an illustrative floor plan to demonstrate that it could meet NDSS standards, and they've submitted the plan to show there's an adequate garden space, and then they've made it single storey, so there's no separation, privacy or loss of privacy issues, and we've considered that a single storey dwelling of that type of scale wouldn't impact the character of the area negatively to resist it on backland matters. In terms of the point in relation to the visibility and display and the bus stop being resulting in inadequate visibility, as well as the low walls in the front, the local highway have considered the existing position, so I sort of reiterate there is an existing access that is used by 135 and 137 Hadley Park Road as it is, so and more cars could technically park at the back and use that access, so it isn't considered detrimental in terms of highway safety ground because of this existing position that we have to consider in terms of the assessment of this application. In terms of Japanese knotweed, we can add an informative in relation to that on any sort of decision that is made, and I think that were most of the points.
How other than 135 and 137, who else has right of access, and do they park vehicles there?
Yeah, it's a matter in the titles of a number of properties. I think in the representation, I think it was. So numbers, in one of the representations that were made, it suggested number 131, 133, 135 and 137 have free use of this unregistered access point within their deeds. That's 4 properties.
And do they park there now?
No. So 135 and 137 will have the dedicated parking at the rear. 131 and 133 don't have dedicated parking, I believe, in the properties and park on the street.
Yeah, it's been answered actually, because I was going to ask about whether it's obviously been picked up that there's not weed on site, so it has to be a condition of an outline. But again, I want to say about the bus stop, I think that's got to be a condition of outline that it should be removed, and obviously I don't know what we can actually do on that entrance there to ensure that isn't blocked by parked cars, because you wouldn't be able to exit it either.
Yeah, there'd be a financial cost associated with moving that bus stop, and the local highway authority haven't considered that's a reasonable request to make, given the existing fallback position of this access point for the one dwelling that's proposed in this plot.
Okay, any further comments? Well, the recommendation is before you then. Been moved. Is there a seconder? All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Everybody against? One against? Any abstentions? No? That is allowed then. Thank you. Right, the next one we've got is TWC 2022-0340, the Cleveland Arms, Hierarchical. Yeah, I thought you'd move that one.
I'll pass on Councillor Wellington's principality comments to my girlfriend when I return home to South Wales tonight.
We're not discussing principality, we're discussing the principality of the Hierarchical. Right, can you present the report, please?
Yeah. So, the planning application site relates to the Cleveland Arms Public House in High Urkel and proposes the conversion of the public house into one dwelling. The application is referred to Planning Committee in the opinion of the Service Delivery Manager due to the number and nature of representations received, which warrants consideration by Planning Committee, and it is recommended for refusal.
Thank you. I've got a couple of speakers now. Councillor Kevin Connor, the Parish Council.
Mr Chairman, members, good evening. The latest in a series of applications for change of use of the Cleveland Arms from public house to residential is predicated on two main factors. Firstly, that there is no need for a pub in High Arkle, either because there is no demand or because a comparable alternative facility already exists. Second, that the property is not viable as a pub and has been marketed in accordance with the requirements of the local plan and the building's listing as an asset of community value. These assertions have been disproved in the detailed reports produced by the independent expert consultants Hotel Solutions and by the Council's planning officer. Both these reports are comprehensive, they're balanced, and they both reach well-supported conclusions and recommendations. I commend the diligence of planning officers, past and present, in their painstaking research and analysis for this application, and I fully support the officer's recommendation. On the subject of need, there is strong local demand to reopen the Cleveland Arms as reflected in the public response. 87% of respondents object to change of use. Of the 3 comments in favour, 2 are from the applicant himself, while the other is from a neighbour who is so exasperated at living near the property which has now become eyesore and nearly derelict that he just wants anything done to improve the building. Arkle Magna Parish Council successfully applied to list the Cleveland Arms as an asset of community value back in 2017, but is disappointed that all subsequent attempts to view, value and negotiate to buy the property have failed. And this brings me to my point on marketing. Evidence from numerous potential buyers, including individuals, local businesses and the bespoke Cleveland Phoenix charity, shows uncooperative and at times obstructive behaviour from the vendor. This creates a strong impression that the marketing exercise was conducted to support the subsequent application for change of use rather than to actually sell the property. Consequently, having reached the end of the ACV listing period, without the community having had a realistic chance to reinstate the facility, the Parish Council has recently reapplied to once again list the Cleveland Arms as an asset of community value. In terms of viability, the independent consultants have highlighted in their report that there are business models that could work successfully. So to summarise, there are credible potential buyers who remain interested in reinstating this valuable community facility. As Hotel Solutions conclude, the Cleveland has not been given a fair chance to secure its survival. The Borough Council has a role to play in this, initially by accepting the recommendation to refuse the application, which is contrary to local and national policies, and thereafter by engaging with relevant stakeholders to facilitate the restoration of this facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. That's okay, don't we? Councillor Stephen Bentley, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I nearly forgot why I came tonight. I'm not going to elaborate on anything that Councillor Connor has just said, because I think members have been given and provided some very diligent, comprehensive reports, both from Hotel Solutions and from the Council Officer James Bank. And I wish to applaud the Council's local planning authority, development team manager, for actually employing that organisation to bring forward that report, because I think it's most helpful. It will be helpful in any future appeal, which I'm sure will happen again, as the applicant's already done that and lost. And on top of that, of course, he didn't even comply with the judge's ruling then, but that's another matter. That'll be for me to sort out when the time comes. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, all I'm going to say is I fully support the recommendation. I think the officer has produced this marvellous and impartial report, and I would like to also pay tribute to the late Karen Denmark for her involvement over a number of years, and of course to David Jones, who has had many enforcement visitations to this site, much which haven't been complied with, but again, I'll leave that for a later date. Don't mention all the later date bits, will you? Because some people might find that I've been a bit naughty.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. We got the message. Back to you.
Thank you, Chair. So, to go to the application site, the existing site is considered to be sui generis use class, so formerly A4 drinking establishment, and ceased trading in 2016 under the ownership of the applicant. It should be noted that north adjacent, the customer car park, is not included within the change of use application, nor is the west adjacent bowling green. Internal photographs of the public house can be seen on the presentation slides, showing that it has been significantly altered and is in a state of disrepair. So the proposed development consists of the change of use from public house to dwelling house. In planning land use class terms, this will change from sui generis to a C3 dwelling house. The proposed scheme would mainly require internal alterations to provide a livable home. 4 parking spaces are provided on the north boundary, with access attained through the existing customer parking area, which is within the applicant's ownership. So to go over the analysis under the local development plan, under section 7 of the local plan, a public house is considered to be a community facility, fitting the following listed description: general facilities such as community centres and halls and other spaces where community groups can meet. Policy Com 1 will not support the building previously used as a community facility unless there is either a lack of demonstrable need or there is an acceptable alternative provision which exists or is concurrently proposed. Furthermore, Policy EC7 is clear that the Council will not support development resulting in the loss of A4 uses, such as public houses or other community uses in rural areas, unless there is an equivalent or alternative use nearby which provides a similar offering and meets the needs of residents. Further, it has been vacant for a period of 12 months and has been robustly marketed over this period. It is clear that there is no equivalent or alternative community facility within Hierarchal to that of the Cleveland Arms, given that it is the only public house in the village. The applicant has attempted to draw an equivalency to the village hall, which has a voluntary 1-day-a-week bar. However, this is clearly does not provide the same offering as a dedicated and established public house, with operating hours throughout the week, and certainly does not have the level of facilities required that a public house would entail. If anything, this pop-up village hall bar is further evidence that there is a demonstrable need, especially because this is a voluntary function by the community on a temporary basis. The applicant has failed to demonstrate through their submitted evidence that there is a lack of demonstrable need for the public house, as the report from Hotel Solutions has confirmed, along with various offers during the marketing campaign and the numerous public comments objecting to the loss of this community facility. There is in fact a strong demand for such a community facility. This is not least demonstrated by the temporary and voluntary village bar, as I just previously mentioned. In assessing the applicant's submitted marketing evaluation documents, Hotel Solutions Limited have provided a thorough independent analysis of the submitted information, along with a site visit, speaking with different stakeholders and documenting the events leading up to this planning application. From the competent meta-analysis provided by Hotel Solutions, it is clear that the applicant has failed to provide robust marketing evidence, and the marketing exercise itself was conducted in poor faith with the objective of not selling the community facility. It should be noted that the planning system does not recognise the private interests of the individual as a material planning consideration. In this case, numerous offers were made by a variety of interested stakeholders, and the applicant refused these offers. These offers were considered reasonable given the assessment provided by Hotel Solutions. The applicant's unwillingness to sell the property does not demonstrate a lack of need. Now, I do just want to go over a couple of updates since the Hotel Solutions and the committee reports were published last week, just to give a balanced appraisal. So the applicant has since come back, and they refer to inaccuracies within the Hotel Solutions report. However, I consider these are considered, well, they're minor points of contention, do not materially overcome policy considerations outlined in this presentation, and I'm happy to outline what these inaccuracies are. The applicant further claims that the Hotel Solutions report was predetermined and tailored to facilitate a recommendation of refusal. I have sought comments from Hotel Solutions, which were received this morning, stating that the report prepared had no preconceptions and drew upon a variety of supporting and objecting sources, with a focus on the key tests from the industry as standard. And again, I'm happy to go through their response to the applicant. The applicant also made comments on the committee report, arguing that all offers received were for residential development, not continued, not as a continued public house use. It is then stipulated by the applicant that no formal offer was made by the Cleveland Phoenix charity. The report from Hotel Solutions and comments from the charity to this application have confirmed that 2 offers were made but not seriously considered by the applicant. It should also be noted that the applicant marketed the property with a covenant restricting its use post-sale as a public house, which was not listed as a marketing requirement from the council, and it is believed to have actively dissuaded prospective purchasers from putting in formal offers. One of which commented during the consultation phase, a member of the public, stipulating that they were interested in running a cafe which would provide a similar offering to a public house, but were obviously put by this covenant. So in conclusion, the council's officers recommend that this application is refused planning permission, as it is considered that the proposed development would result in the unacceptable loss of a community facility and is contrary to local policies SB4, COM1 and EC7 of the local plan.
Before you, Jim?
I move that we refuse and follow what's before us.
Any comments? Nigel?
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious that the applicant has got a plan. I mean, if you look at the plan in the report, I mean, it was drawn up on 2 years ago in December. So there's obviously been there is absolutely no intention of it being marketed and sold as a pub. So the only thing that I mean, what does concern me is that I'm quite happy for us to refuse the application. The thing is, though, that as we've seen before, these buildings are just left to become derelict until they become unsafe, and then all of a sudden the applicant gets their way, and that's what really irritates me. I mean, is there what can we do to prevent that happening?
Well, we go down for about the compulsory purchase.
I think that might have been an option explored by Hotel Solutions, but ultimately it relies with the owner of the property, really. Excuse me. I mean, the property is in a state of disrepair. There's nothing really, I think, that we can do unless others from the council have got other views on it. But I think compulsory purchase might be a possibility.
Jane and then Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say we've seen a number of public houses go that way, derelict, and then we've had a very convenient fire in a number of them. And which is the buildings then they have to be demolished, and that's always a risk, because but with this one it's a huge asset in that community, especially a rural community as well. There's no other area that actually people can come and meet. There's a village hall, granted, but I mean it's minimal. I suppose there's classes and things, but I mean, as for a genuine meeting place, and I know it's how you use that space. The difficulty is obviously there's been a covenant, because obviously you couldn't do a lot of things in there. So, but I just think that once it's lost forever. We're not going to get a building like that back.
Peter?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can raise the spectre of the Royal Victoria Hotel in Newport as part of those, but there you go. No, really, Chair, all I was actually going to do, having listened to the speakers and what they've said in the reports themselves, I would happily second the movement from Councillor Lubbridge that we carry on.
Okay. Bob?
I just had one question. Why did the pub stop trading in 2016?
Yeah, precisely.
Was it because the locals weren't using it? It wasn't a viable pub, and therefore it closed. And how can they say?
Mr. Chairman, I could answer that if you'd allow me, rather than the officer.
You made the point of choosing that route.
Stephen, I can't allow that. I think the officer to do it. I know what you see going as well. Okay. The officer.
So the applicant purchased the property in 2013, and it traded from what I believe for 3 years, and then it's stopped trading in 2016. And from what I've read from public representations, and also with the evidence submitted, that it was trading, and then as the years went by, things started to change. So, for example, I think there was a change in food offering. I think there was a change in hours. I think there was a little bit of contention with some of the local community. I think there was a disagreement, or there was an issue with the bowling green. But again, these aren't really material planning issues. But that just kind of explains a little bit of the history.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, James, if the pub was sort of doing well and so on, the same question again. Why would it, would the people who own it close it if they were making a profit on it? Why would they turn around and say, right, let's close it down and use it for some other purposes? I mean, all the pub owners I know, they gladly welcome the customers or the food or whatever it is. Why would they close it?
Well, I don't know, 'cause it's not really within the remit of the planning application.
Why it's closed down is not part of the thing. It's whether, in fact, we allow it to go completely. From my point of view, I think I've always been opposed to pubs closing because they're community assets. They're meeting points for people, and where people can meet and socialise and also intermingle. As that's the thing. Pubs are historical for that, and I would support the recommendation to refuse this. So it's been moved and seconded. Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Anybody against? No? And I'll tell you why it was closed down afterwards. You need to look what's around it. Look at the pub and what's around it, and look where the car park was and what's on it now.
Yeah.
I won't say it was asset stripping. Right. Item 6.4 is 2022-0424, the site of the former Reynolds House, former Boyd House, Ironmasters Way, and that's on page 75. And if you look at the window there, that's where it is. So you can have a site visit if you look at the window. Andy?
Thank you, Chair. So the application seeks full planning permission for enabling and engineering works comprising ground remediation, reprofiling and demolition of the substation in preparation for the proposed station quarter redevelopment, which will be subject to separate applications. As Chair said, the site is situated at the rear of this building, and the application is proposed for approval, subject to a memorandum of understanding to secure monies towards biodiversity net gain, plus conditions including but not restricted to a site environmental management plan to control the hours of operation and a dust mitigation plan. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Any debate on this one? No, Nigel.
The only thing is that, I mean, we saw the other day the traffic chaos that was around the town centre, and therefore I think we should take that as sort of, or take the lessons from that. I am a bit concerned that the hours of operation are sort of like standard operating hours, whereby I do think that it should concentrate more on perhaps quieter times when it's going to have less impact on the businesses at the town centre, because they're all recovering from the pandemic and trying to trying to stay in business in some cases, particularly with the extra cost of energy, and therefore I don't think it's very helpful if we're putting sort of traffic problems to deter people from actually coming to the town centre. So that's why I was a bit surprised to see, sort of it was like office hours and it was just Saturday mornings and nothing on Sundays or bank holidays, when Sundays and bank holidays would probably be the best day to be operating, really. But
we've got that fiasco with the problems on the EP.
Andy, do you want to come back on that comment?
Well, I know that there is harm potentially caused by the operation on a Monday to Friday and a Saturday morning, but equally it's the availability of construction workers on the Sundays and bank holidays, and ultimately because they're out of normal hours, it does add to the cost of the development. So you have to ask yourself, is it reasonable to make them work in those exceptional hours compared to the harm that would be generated? I think there's quite a high-tech solution to the construction here, and they've got booking in systems online, which is outlined in the report, which will hopefully alleviate any construction traffic waiting on the highway. And at the minute it's a big site, so there won't be any problems with construction vehicles getting in and out. So that's the response, really, Chair.
You, Jane?
Yeah, I just wondered about the SEMP, Andy, because you've got the dust mitigation, but if it starts now, we're going to have the winter. So what about the mud?
Yes, sorry.
I mean, obviously, you would think it, but you emphasise the dust. Well, I can understand the need, but it'll be mud we'll be talking about.
Yeah, so in the SEMP, we'll ensure that it has wheel wash facilities upon exit as well.
Okay, because of the main roads I'm thinking about and the junctions around the town centre.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just a second again, Councillor Jim Loveridge's movement of
so
this issue.
recommendation been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please show. Nobody against, right? Then we come to the final one tonight, which is 2022-1179 Land Hadley Quarry, Hadley Road, Hadley. Who's doing this one? Right.
Landfill to quarry.
It's a good landfill place, so yes.
This one's a restoration of a quarry, so it's hopefully good news. So yeah, this full application proposes construction of 186 dwellings with public open space and play area, and is before committee due to financial contributions requiring a Section 106 agreement. Main access will be located off the recently realigned Hadley Road to the east, and there will be a pedestrian-only access proposed to the northwest corner of the site, which provides access towards the Hadley Community Centre further to the west, as well as existing bus stops on Morseflow Road in that direction as well. Development will provide a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses along with 2 bedroom bungalows, and would include 25% affordable units. Members should know that previous consent was granted for development on this site in 2011 but did not come forward. Officers consider this is a well-designed scheme located on a brownfield former quarry site. It's also to be recognised that while some tree losses are proposed as part of the scheme, in addition to new trees and usable public open space being proposed within the site, a tree replacement contribution would be provided by a Section 106 agreement. The application is also subject to a number of other contributions, including highways, education, plain open space and off-site biodiversity. It is recommended that delegated authority is granted to Development Management Service Delivery Manager to grant permission subject to Section 106 agreement and conditions. There's just one small update, Chair. just let members know a plan was received, confirming that the site would provide 100% vehicle charging points. So every property on there will provide that as well.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ian. Any comments? Jane?
Yeah, I was just looking at the, it says the off-site play area, the 106 agreement. I just wondered out, because I'm not familiar with it, so with the actual positioning of it, so I'm wondering how close is that actually to the site on a NEAP? Because it says towards improvements on a nearby, which is a substantial sum of money for a 106, but it's not actually physically on that site, and it's quite a large site. With
There's a leap proposed on the site, and then there's money being put. So there is, and it should be within the plans as well. So there's a play facility within the site, and then there'll be monies towards local facilities within the immediate area.
Okay, so that's two.
So yeah, so
it doesn't actually say that in there, but yeah, that was the main one. The only thing is that it's very favourable towards the 106. I just hope it isn't going to come back and ask for a variation. That's my.
I've had that confirmed by Persimmon that they won't do that, and I've had that in writing from them. It was a concern,
Yes.
and they've confirmed that they're not considering doing that.
Okay, because I mean it's, you know, there's quite a substantial amount of funding.
Sure.
And I just wondered, the primary and secondary education zone, normally we name the schools. Is there any reason why that hasn't happened in this case? It's usually identified as each school.
The education department haven't particularly mentioned them in this particular case, other than the radius that they're proposed on. Yeah, the regulations don't require authority to mention where it's going to go, but say it's within a 2-mile radius and a 3-mile radius for the primary and secondary.
I just asked a question because some planning applications do.
Okay,
I think if there's specific projects that it can go towards, then it would do that. Obviously, it can be split.
Yeah, Chair, I know this area well. You know, used to go around and play there, but it's adjacent to the Millennium Village, and we sort of gave a planning application. This is in Ketley, and then further down where the railway station is, Hadley, and this area always looked really bad and ugly, and I'm glad that they're going to sort it out and build some of these houses there. So yes, something should have been done about that area years ago. So I'm all in favour of it.
Excellent. Sorry, I was pleased to hear that they're going to put vehicle charging points. The vehicle charging points you said are going in, but I would say it's probably more pertinent with the cost of fuel if solar panels were in the roof.
There's no requirement to do that within policy, so we have got, there is a guide towards putting in vehicle charging points, and that will come in eventually anyway as part of building regs. But yeah, you're right, they haven't proposed that as part of the scheme at the moment. I understand that's something we want to look for, but I'm as officer I'm quite pleased that they're putting in the vehicle charging points.
Jim? He said the same thing, but I was thinking solar panel. Can we try and squeeze them to put a few on a couple of the properties, the bigger ones?
Then if I can come back to...
Whilst we encourage developers and development to be energy efficient and support renewables being in schemes, we don't have a policy that requires that, so we've got nothing tangible for us to go and ask that for.
I was thinking, I'm grateful they're putting the electric points in, but could we squeeze just a couple of them to...
Building regulation sets out in terms of what energy efficiency needs to be achieved. It doesn't need to be solar panels, it could be in other ways, forms such as air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, and that's left for a building control measure, not through the planning regime. So whilst we encourage it, we haven't got any policy to go back and negotiate.
Peter, nice to try that.
Peter, do you want to?
Yeah, just briefly, really. I mean, it's one of these that It's nice to see the parish council supporting it, for one thing. Also, the fact that there's a pretty decent 106 situation there as well. Just a question about the trees. I noted that it was objected to by Arboriculture. Is there really no suitable on site in that massive space?
The trees that are going in will obviously be smaller trees, and obviously street trees to facilitate around the development. But to actually replace like-for-like trees within the site just isn't possible. So that's why we've gone down the route of getting a financial contribution to hopefully put for the authority to be able to find a suitable location where trees will grow and flourish.
But there will be some trees planted
There's
within the site.
There's a lot of
anyway.
trees being planted in the site. They're just not like for like replacements.
Because I'm looking forward to these forests we're going to build, because there's an awful lot of money going into a big pot
There
for
is a
trees
bit of
somewhere. No, that's okay. That answers the question. Thank you.
And there's the Suds Pond in the, which is already approved, in fact, as part of different
Okay.
consent. But the Suds Pond, it was required for the road, but it's also required for the development.
Thank
as well.
you. I'll finish by saying move it then, Jack, please.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded.
Makes a nice show, doesn't it?
The recommendation is now before you. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Nobody against, okay. That's allowed. That brings us to the end of the agenda.